We have had peace in these lands for many years now. But when an invasion,
Enemy.
The world is not a one-man job.
I need no one to protect me.
Well,
Be smarter.
Whatever you plan to do, do it now!
Two worlds, one war, and a battle that will decide the fate of an entire kingdom. Welcome back to M Cinema Reviews. Today, we enter the epic fantasy world of Warcraft 2016, where humans and orcs clash in a fight filled with honor, magic, and betrayal. Get ready, because this is where legends are born. Warcraft is a fantasy action film based on Warcraft by Blizzard Entertainment. Directed by Duncan Jones, the movie stars Travis Fimmel, Paula Patton, Ben Foster, Dominic Cooper, Tobey Campbell, Ben Schnetzer, Robert Kaczynski, and Daniel Wu. The story takes place in the fantasy world of Azeroth, where humans and orcs become locked in a massive war. After the powerful warlock Gul'dan opens a magical portal between worlds, Gul'dan uses dark magic known as Fel to lead the orc horde from their dying homeland Draenor into Azeroth in search of new world to conquer. Among the orcs is Drutan, chief of the Frostwolf clan, who begins to question Gul'dan's brutal methods and the corrupting power of Fel magic. Drutan realizes Gul'dan's leadership is destroying his people and putting their future at risk. On the human side, the kingdom of Stormwind is defended by the legendary warrior Anduin Lothar, King Lane and the young Meg Khadgar. Together, they investigate the mysterious attack occurring across Azeroth and uncover the truth behind the invading horde and Gul'dan's dark power. As the conflict escalates, a half-orc survivor named Garona becomes trapped between the both of worlds, distrusted by humans and orcs alike. She forms uneasy alliances while struggling to find where she truly belongs. Meanwhile, the powerful guardian Medivh attempts to help stop the invasion, using his magical abilities, though dangerous secrets surrounding him threaten the entire kingdom. Eventually, Drutan secretly seeks peace with the human after realizing Gul'dan is the true enemy. However, Gul'dan manipulates the Horde through fear and dark magic, leading to betrayal, devastating battles, and the beginning of a full-scale war between humans and orcs. The film focuses heavily on theme of honor, survival, corruption, and unity, showing that both sides contain heroes and villains, rather than presenting the conflict as purely good versus evil. Although the movie received mixed to negative reviews from critics, it became a major commercial success internationally, especially among fans of the Warcraft games, and was praised for its visual effects, world building, and faithfulness to the franchise's lore. In Warcraft, the story begins on the dying world of Draenor, homeland of the orcs. Their land is collapsing because of fell magic, a destructive dark power used by the sinister orc warlock Gul'dan. Seeking a new world for the orc horde, Gul'dan unites the clans and opens a magical portal to the peaceful human world of Azeroth by sacrificing captured Draenei and draining their life force. Among the horde are Drutan, noble leader of the Frostwolf clan, his pregnant mate Darka, and his loyal friend Orgrim Doomhammer. After crossing into Azeroth, Darka gives birth to a weak baby boy named Gyol. Gul'dan saves the infant using fell magic, unknowingly marking the child with dark energy. Meanwhile, in the human kingdom of Stormwind, Commander Anduin Lothar and the young Meg Khadgar investigates brutal attacks on villages. Khadgar discovers traces of fell magic on the victims, leading King Lenrin to send them to the powerful guardian Medivh at Karazhan. Together, Lothar, Khadgar, and Medivh investigate the growing threat and clash with the invading orcs. During one battle, they capture Garona, a half-orc slave torn between two worlds. Though initially distrusted, Garona eventually aids the humans and reveals Gul'dan's plan to fully invade Azeroth. As tensions rise, Rutan secretly seeks peace with the humans after realizing Gul'dan is corrupting the orc and destroying their honor. However, tragedy soon strikes. Rutan's attempt to unite with the humans is betrayed, leading to the death of Lothar's son Kalan at the hands of the brutal orc warrior Black Hand. Suspicion also grows around Medivh, and Khadgar eventually discovers the horrifying truth. Medivh himself has been corrupted by fell magic and secretly helped Gul'dan open the portal to Azeroth. Back at the Horde camp, Gul'dan tightens his control through fear and violence. Blackhand destroys the Frostwolf clan, while Draka sacrifices herself after sending her infant son Giol away down a river in a basket. Drutan finally challenges Gul'dan to Magora, a sacred duel for leadership of the Horde. Gul'dan dishonors the duel by using fell magic to drain Rutan's life, killing him in front of the other orcs and showing the true depth of his corruption. As Gul'dan attempts to reopen the portal and bring the full horde into Azeroth, the human army launches a desperate assault. Lothar and Khadgar confronts Mehdev at Karazhan, and manages to kill the demonic force controlling him. Before dying, Mahdev uses the last of his power to close the portal and save many prisoners. In the film's emotional climax, King Lane secretly asks Garona to kill him so she can gain the Horde's trust and possibly help create peace between humans and orcs in the future. Though heartbroken, Garona obeys. Later, Lothar challenges Blackhand to Makora and defeats him, avenging his son's death. Respecting their tradition, the orcs allow Lothar to live with King Lane's body. The movie ends with the human kingdoms, elves, and dwarves forming the alliance against the Horde, while Orgrim preserves one of the Drutan's tusks for Geol, the child who will one day become the legendary Thrall. Meanwhile, Geol's basket is discovered by a human, hinting at the future destiny of both worlds. Warcraft 2016, a complete guide to the casting from Azeroth to silver screen. Every actor, every character, every story. Introduction: Bringing Azeroth to life. When Warcraft was released in June 2016, it arrived at the culmination of a decade long development process that had stretched across multiple studios, directors, and creative teams. Based on Blizzard Entertainment's legendary real time strategy game series, and by extension, the massively popular World of Warcraft MMORPG. The film represented arguably the most ambitious attempt yet to translate a beloved video game franchise into a full scale Hollywood blockbuster. Directed by Duncan Jones, the son of music icon David Bowie. Warcraft was produced by Legendary Pictures in partnership with Blizzard Entertainment and Atlas Entertainment, and distributed globally by Universal Pictures. From the very beginning, one of the central challenges facing the production was casting. The Warcraft universe is populated by an enormous array of icon characters, many of whom fans had spent years, in some cases decades, imagining in three dimensions. These were not blank slate fictional creatures, but deeply established personalities with well documented backstories, voice lines, and visual design references embedded in the collective memory of millions of devoted players. Choosing the right actors to embody Anduin, Lothar, Drutan, Gul'dan, Khadgar, Garona, and the rest of the ensemble was therefore not simply a matter of conventional filmmaking, it was an act of cultural negotiation between Hollywood and one of the most passionate fandom in the whole world. The film ultimately assembled an impressive multinational cast blending established Hollywood names, rising character actors, seasoned television performers, and international stars. Some were household names with decades of work behind them. Others were relative newcomers whose careers would be significantly shaped by their involvement in the project. A significant portion of the cast performed their roles through performance capture technology, a fact that reflected the film's broader ambition to present photorealistic orc characters alongside live action human actors in the same cinematic frame. This video provides a comprehensive exploration of the Warcraft 2016 cast, from the lead performers to supporting players, from uncredited cameos to motion capture specialists, examining who they are, how they come to their roles, what they brought to their characters, and how their performances were received. By looking at the full cast in detail, we can better appreciate both the ambition of the film and the fascinating array of talent that gathered around a project unlike any other Hollywood in history. Duncan Jones, the director behind the vision before examining the cast. It is important to understand the filmmaker who assembled them, since a director's sensibilities, priorities, and relationships inevitably shape who ends up in the front of the camera. Duncan Jones had established himself as a distinctive voice in science fiction cinema with his debut feature Moon 2009, a claustrophobic and deeply humanist space drama starring Sam Rockwell, and his follow up Source Code 2011, a taut time loop thriller with Jake Gyllenhaal. Both films demonstrated Jones' commitment to character over spectacle, his interest in moral ambiguity, and his ability to work intentionally with genre constraints. Neither, however, had prepared audiences or the industry for the sheer scale of what Warcraft would require. Jones had been a World of Warcraft player himself, which gave him a personal investment in the material that many directors hired for franchise work lack. He was determined not to make a cynical cash grab, but rather a film that honored the lore and spirit of the games, while also functioning as compelling stand-alone narrative. This philosophy directly influenced his casting decisions. He wanted actors who could bring genuine emotional depth to characters that might otherwise be dismissed as genre archetypes, and who were willing to commit fully to a production environment saturated with green screen, motion capture, and digital effects. Jones co-wrote the screenplay with Charles Leavitt, working to structure the story so that it gave meaningful arcs to characters on both the human and orc sides of the conflict. This dual protagonist approach was unusual for a fantasy blockbuster and placed particular demands on the casting process, since the film needs actors capable of carrying emotional weight as CGI orcs just as much as those who would appear in conventional live action footage. Travis Fimmel as Anduin Lothar. The casting of the film's central human protagonist, Sir Anduin Lothar, champion of Stormwind, was one of the most consequential decisions of the entire production. Lothar is one of the most iconic figures in all of Warcraft lore, a knight and a military commander of extraordinary valor and personal loss, whose story is woven through the very origins of the conflict that would eventually shape the entire Warcraft universe. He needed to be played by some with genuine screen charisma, physical credibility, and the emotional range to convey a character defined as much by grief and duty as by action hero swagger. The role attracted significant competition. Among those who emerged as Fortuners during the casting process were Paul Dano, Anson Mount, and Anton Yelchin, a diverse group of actors with very different energies and strengths. Ultimately, in October 2013, Australian actor Travis Fimmel secured the part, a decision that would prove both inspired and somewhat controversial among sections of the fan base who had imagined a more conventionally heroic screen presence in the role. Travis Fimmel was born on July 15, 1979, in Actua, Victoria, Australia. He grew up on his family's cattle farm in Lockington, dreaming of a career in Australian rules football. After a broken leg derailed his hopes of playing for the St Kilda Football Club at the AFL, he studied architecture briefly before a chance encounter redirected his life entirely. His roommate spotted him working out at gym in Hawthorne and suggested he contact the Chadwick Models Agency. This led to a modeling career that saw Fimmel become one of the most in-demand male models in the world. At the turn of millennium, gracing the covers of magazines including Esquire, Rogue, and Empire. The transition from modeling to acting came with talent manager David Woodward, saw potential in Fimmel beyond the runway. At Woodward's urging, Fimmel moved to Los Angeles and immediately enrolled with acting coach Livana Chubbuck, a legendary Hollywood teacher whose alumni included Brad Pitt, Charlize Theron, Jake Gyllenhaal, and Halle Berry. The grounding he received with Chubbuck gave Fimmel the technical foundation to pursue roles across television and smaller films. He appeared in several productions in the mid 2000s, building his craft steadily, if not spectacularly. The breakthrough came in 2013 when he was cast as Ragnar Lothbrok, the central figure of the History Channel's epic Viking drama Vikings. That role transformed Fimmel's career. His portrayal of the charismatic, unpredictable, spiritually restless Norse chieftain won widespread critical acclaim and made him an international star. Fimmel brought an unusual quality to Ranger, a combination of raw physicality and mercurial wit and melancholic depth that made the character feel both mythic and achingly human. It was precisely this quality that made him an inspired choice for Anduin Lothar. Interestingly, Fimmel later revealed that he had not been familiar with the Warcraft franchise before signing on for the film. For someone who had spent years deeply immersed in the mythology of Vikings, his approach to Lothar was therefore shaped less by pre existing fandom than by the screenplay and his conversation with Jones. This perhaps gave his performance a certain freshness, an outsider's perspective on the world that devoted players knew intimately. He brought the same sardonic humor and brooding resilience to Lothar that had made Ragnar so compelling, finding in both characters a man defined by the tension between personal love and public duty. In the film, Lothar is portrayed as a commander who has sacrificed his family life for the protection of kingdom. A man who discovers that his own son Callan has enlisted in the military ranks without his knowledge. Fimmel handles these emotional undercurrents with subtlety, allowing the audiences to read depth beneath the surface bravado. His chemistry with Dominic Cooper's King Lane provides the film's human heart, while his scene with the Paula Patton's Grayson Garona provides its most interesting cross-cultural dimension. Paula Patton as Garona Halvorsen. If Anduin Lothar represents the traditional hero archetype of the Warcraft universe, Garona Halvorsen represents its most complex and morally ambiguous dimension. A half orc woman who occupies no clear place in either the human world or the orc world. Garona is caught between cultures, loyalties, and identities in a way that gives her unique dramatic potential. The casting of the role was consequently one of the most discussed decisions of the production. Paula Patton, an American actress born in Los Angeles on December 5, 1975, was ultimately chosen for the role. The decision was not without controversy. Some fans felt that human actresses with prosthetic makeup to suggest orc heritage was less convincing approach than one that leaned more heavily into digital performance capture, as the fully orc characters did. However, the filmmaker made the deliberate choice to keep Garona as a practical on screen presence, reflecting her unique in between status in the narrative. Before Patton was confirmed, the role attracted interest from remarkable array of actresses: Idina Menzel, Debbie Gibson, Julie Delpy, Alison Eastwood, and Leighton Misseter were among those considered, illustrating both the breadth of the search and the difficulty of defining exactly what the role required. Patton was announced as a part of the main cast on December 4, 2013, alongside Fimmel, Ben Foster, Dominic Cooper, Toby Cabell, and Robert Kaczynski. Patton made her feature film debut in the romantic comedy Hitch, 2005. Opposite Will Smith, she subsequently appeared in Deja Vu 2006 for director Tony Scott before achieving wider recognition in Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol 2011, in which she starred alongside Tom Cruise in a high stakes action role that demonstrated her physical abilities and screen presence. She also appeared in Precious 2009 in a supporting role that showed her dramatic range. Warcraft represented a significantly different challenge, one requiring her to navigate layers of prosthetic makeup while maintaining emotional transparency and to portray a character whose divided loyalties make her one of the most psychologically complex figures in the film. In the film, Garona serves as a diplomatic envoy who crosses over from the orc world and gradually forms an alliance and something approaching a romantic connection with Lothar. Her arc is one of the growing agency and self determination. She begins the story as a prisoner and a translator and ends it having made the choices that will carry profound consequences. Patton's performance was generally praised for its physicality and emotional commitment, even if the character's script level development was sometimes criticized as underdeveloped given the film's large ensemble. Ben Foster as Mehdev, one of all the human characters in Warcraft. Mehdev is arguably the most dramatically rich. The guardian of Azeroth is a figure of immense magical power and equally immense internal conflict. A protector who has been secretly corrupted by the very dark magic he was supposed to combat. His arc in the film is essentially a tragic one, the story of a man whose gifts have become a curse and whose capacity for self deception makes him far more dangerous than any straightforward villain. Ben Foster, an American actor born in Boston on October 29, 1980, was cast in the role, and his choice was one of the production's most intriguing decisions. Foster is an actor's actor, someone who has consistently chosen roles for their complexity rather than their commercial appeal and who brings an intensity and unpredictability to whatever project he undertakes. He is known for his ability to inhabit morally ambiguous characters with genuine psychological depth, making him a natural fit for a character like Mehdev. Foster's career trajectory is one of the more unusual in contemporary Hollywood. He came to the prominence through his work in television, most notably HBO's drama 6 Feet Under, before transitioning into film with roles that emphasized eccentricity and unpredictability. His portrayal of the drug addicted Angel in X Men The Last Stand 2006 was visually striking. Meanwhile, his work in 310 to Yuma 2007 as the dangerous Charlie Prince won him considerable critical praise and established him as a serious dramatic actor. Hell or High Water 2016, released the same year as Warcraft, saw him earn some of his most celebrated reviews. In Warcraft, Foster's Mehtav is both the film's most compelling figure and its most tragic. The Guardian exists at the intersection of heroism and corruption, genuine in his desire to protect Azeroth, but increasingly unable to resist the fell magic that has taken root within him. Foster plays this contradiction with considerable subtlety, allowing the audience to see both the man Mehdev wants to be and the monster he is becoming. His scenes with Ben Schnetzer, young Meg Gallagher, in which mentor and protege navigates relationship of growing distrust, are among the most dramatically alive moments in the film. Foster also worked closely with the movement coach and stunt coordinator Terry Notre to develop physical vocabulary for how Dave's magic manifests, a detail that speaks to the film's commitment to grounding its fantastical element in embodied performance rather than pure digital effect. Dominic Cooper as King Lane Rin. The role of King Lanrin, the noble ruler of Stormwood Kingdom, required an actor capable of projecting regal authority without sacrificing warmth and humanity. As Anduin Lothar's brother-in-law and closest ally, Lane needed to be someone that audience could believe in as a leader, not a distant figurehead but a genuine partner in the struggle to protect his people. Dominic Cooper, an English actor born in Greenwich, London on May 2, 1978, brought exactly the combination of dignity and accessibility that the role demanded. Cooper first came to widespread international attention as Sky in the hit musical film Mamma Mia! 2008, a role that showcased his considerable charm and musical abilities. He subsequently built a diverse filmography that included The Duchess 2008, An Education 2009, The Devil's Double 2011, in which he delivered a tour de force dual performance as both Uday Hussein and his body double. He became familiar to global audiences through his recurring role as Howard Stark in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, appearing in Captain America: The First Avenger 2011 and the television series Agent Carter. In Warcraft, Cooper's King Lane is presented as a man of genuine conscience who is trying to find a solution to the orc invasion that does not require the total annihilation of either side. He sees in Rutan's offer of alliance a possible path to peace and is willing to take risks that his advisor considered reckless. Cooper plays this idealism with conviction, making Lane feel like a genuinely good man in an impossible difficult situation rather than a knave fool. His scenes with female crackle with the ease and affection of long friendship, and his relationship with Ruth Nagal's Lady Taria gives the film one of its most quietly affecting emotional dimensions. Toby Cabell as Druton and Antonidas. If the human cast has a clear protagonist in the Travis Fimmel, Anduin Luther, the orc side of the story is anchored by Toby Cabell's performance as Druton, chieftain of the Frostwolf clan. Drutan is, by any measure, the film's most complex and emotionally resonant character, a leader who has the wisdom and moral clarity to recognize that Gul'dan's fell magic is destroying not just other worlds but his own people, and the courage to seek an impossible alliance with the human who are his enemies. Toby Cabell, an English actor born in Pontefract, West Yorkshire, on July 9, 1983, delivered what many critics and fans considered the film's finest performance, despite the fact that it was executed almost entirely through performance capture technology. Dressed in an emotion capture suit and performing on practical set augmented by digital environments. Campbell gave Druton a physicality, emotional expressiveness, and moral gravity that transcended the technology mediating the performance. Campbell had established himself as one of the most versatile character actors of his generation through roles in films including Control 2007, Rock'n'Rolla 2008, Wrath of the Titans 2012, Dawn of Planet of the Apes 2014, and Fantastic Four 2015. His ability to convey complex inner states through minimalist expression made him particularly suited for performance capture work, which requires actor to project emotion in a way that can survive the translation into a fully digital character. In Warcraft, Duroton is given one of the film's most affecting arcs. His wife Draka, played by Anne Galvin, gives birth to their son Gyoll at the very beginning of the film. In circumstances of terrible danger, the love between Duroton and Draka and their fierce determination to protect their child provides the emotional core of the orc storyline and gives the audiences an immediate human, or rather deeply orc point of identification. Campbell and Galvin's work in these scenes is remarkable for the degree to which it makes the audience forget that they are watching digital characters. Campbell also portrayed the Archmage Antonidas, leader of the Kirin Tor Make Council of Dalaran, in a dual role that demonstrated the film's willingness to mine the depth of the game's lore for supporting characters. The Antonidas character is largely there to establish the political dimensions of the human make's response to the orc invasion, but Cabell brings even this limited screen time its dual weight. Ben Schnetzer as Khadgar. The role of Khadgar, the gifted young mage who becomes an unlikely hero in the struggle against the fell corrupted Mehdev and the orc invasion, was filled by American actor Ben Schnetzer. Born in New York City on November 29, 1990, Schnetzer had come to international attention with his performance in British drama Pride 2014, in which he played Mark Ashton, the young gay activist who organized solidarity efforts between LGBTQ groups and striking Welsh minor in 1984. His performance was universally acclaimed for its warmth, wit, and emotional depth, making him one of the most exciting young actors working in British and American cinema. In Warcraft, Schnetzer's character provides the film with its most classically archetypal narrative through line. He is the young person of great potential who must discover their abilities and take their place in a large struggle. Having been trained by Kirin Tor to succeed Mahdev as guardian, Khadgar left the order and eventually found his place in Stormwind. His arrival at the beginning of the film, bearing warnings about dark magic he has detected, sets the plot in motion, and his subsequent journey from inexperienced mage to genuine hero provides one of the film's most satisfying character arcs. Schnetzers discussed the challenge of performing in an environment saturated with visual effects at the film's premiere, noting that convincing oneself of the reality of scenes involving digital creatures and environments required a particular kind of committed imagination. His earnest and natural intellectual curiosity served the role well, and his scenes with Ben Foster's Mehtav carry a genuine complexity. The relationship between a student who suspects his mentor and the mentor who is hiding something enormous. Robert Kaczynski as Orgrim Doomhammer. Orgrim Doomhammer is one of the most iconic characters in all of Warcraft lore. The eventual wielder of the legendary Doomhammer weapon and a figure whose story would eventually span multiple games in the series. In the film, Orgrim is positioned as Rutan's closest friend and second in command, a character whose loyalty is tested when Rutan's growing opposition to Gul'dan put everything at risk. The role went to Robert Kaczynski, an English actor born in Hayward Heath, West Sussex on November 6, 1983. Kaczynski first came to prominence through long-running British soap opera before transitioning to high-profile work. He had supporting roles in Pacific Rim (2013) and Captain Marvel (2019), and was known to American television audiences through his work in HBO's vampire drama True Blood. His physical presence and ability to convey warrior nobility made him a compelling choice for Orgrim. Like Tobey Cabell and the other orc performers, Kaczynski worked with movement coach Terry Nortre to develop the physical vocabulary of an orc, learning to move in ways that were simultaneously believable as an entirely different kind of body, while remaining emotionally legible to human audiences. The performance capture work required Kaczynski and his colleagues to essentially perform complete scenes in motion capture suits, trusting that the digital artist would translate their intentions into the finished characters. Orgrim's arc in the film, from reluctant participant in Gul'dan's schemes to eventual agent of justice against the Horde's corruption, provides one of the most satisfying supporting character journeys, and Kaczynski invests it with genuine weight despite the technological mediation. Clancy Brown as Black Hand. Among the voice and performance capture artists in the film's orc cast, Clancy Brown stands out as one of the most experienced and celebrated. Brown is an American actor born in Urbana, Ohio on January 5, 1959, who has had one of the most distinctive careers in Hollywood, spanning live action film, television, and voice acting with equal distinction. In live action, Brown is best known for his powerful portrayal of the brutal prison guard Captain Byron Hadley in the Shawshank Redemption (1994), one of the most celebrated performances in that beloved film. He also had significant roles in Highlander (1986), Starship Troopers (1997), and numerous other genre films. His imposing physical presence and extraordinary voice. Deep, resonant, and capable of extraordinary means made him a natural choice for the villainous Black Hand. As an orc warrior who had been manipulated and empowered by Gul'dan's fell magic to serve as the Horde's instrument of destruction. Blackhand is the film's most overtly monstrous character. Brown's voice performance gave the character an imposing gravity even through the layers of digital translation, and his physicality in the motion capture work provided the animators with a compelling physical template. Beyond film, Brown has an extraordinary career in animation voice acting, most famously as the voice of Mr. Krabs in SpongeBob SquarePants since 1999, a role he has played for more than 2 decades. He has also voiced numerous characters in DC animated productions, video games, and other franchise properties. His breadth of experience across different performance modes made him particularly well suited to the demands of Warcraft's distinctive blend of live and digital work. Daniel Wu as Gul'dan, the orc warlock, whose insatiable hunger for power drives the film's central conflict, is played by Daniel Wu, an American actor born in San Francisco, California on September 30, 1974. Wu represents one of the film's most interesting casting choices, bringing an international profile and a career trajectory very different from his Hollywood colleagues to the role of the story's primary antagonist. Wu had spent decades building a distinguished career in Hong Kong cinema before Warcraft marked one of his most significant Hollywood appearances. In Hong Kong, he had become a major star through action films and had developed a reputation for physical commitment and dramatic range that translated effectively into the performance capture environment. Warcraft came at a transitional moment in his career, as he was simultaneously beginning work on the AMC series Into the Badlands, in which he starred as the warrior Sunny and earned consistent critical acclaim for a role that showcased his martial arts abilities and acting depth. As Gul'dan, Wu provides the film with its most purely malevolent energy. The orc warlock is a creature of pure ambition, willing to sacrifice anything and anyone, including his own people, to feed his addiction of fell magic and satisfy his drive for dominance. Wu's performance through the motion capture technology invests the character with a cold, calculating intelligence that makes him genuinely threatening, and his interaction with the film's other orc characters crackle with dangerous authority. Wu subsequently appeared in a high-profile Bollywood production including Tomb Raider 2018, Reminiscence 2021, and had a recurring role in the fourth season of HBO's Westworld, confirming the trajectory that Warcraft helped initiate. Ruth Negga as Lady Tarja. Ruth Negga, the Ethiopian-Irish actress born in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia on January 7, 1982, brought considerable pedigree to the relatively modest role of Lady Tarja, Queen of Stormwind and wife of King Lane. Nega had been building a formidable reputation in British theatre and television before Warcraft, and 2016 would prove to be her breakthrough year in spectacular fashion. In the same year that Warcraft was released, Nega starred in Jeff Nichols' drama "Loving", playing the real-life civil rights figure Mildred Loving, a black woman whose marriage to a white man challenges Virginia's anti-miscegenation laws. Her performance earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress, one of the most celebrated of the year. Simultaneously, she was beginning work on the AMC television adaptation of Preacher, in which she would play the gun-toting Tulips O'Hare in the role that won her further acclaim and demonstrated her extraordinary range. In Warcraft, Nega's Lady Tarja is given relatively limited screen time compared to the film's more action-oriented characters, but she brings warmth, intelligence, and quiet dignity to every scene. Her presence helps ground King Lane's character in domestic reality, making the political stakes personal. Nega herself spoke warmly about working with Duncan Jones, describing him as a kind and grounded director who made the vast production feel manageable and human. Anna Galvin as Draka. Anna Galvin, as Canadian actress, took on the role of Draka, wife of Drutan, and one of the film's most emotionally significant supporting characters. Draka's arc is simultaneously one of the most touching and most harrowing in the film. She gives birth to her and Ruton's son, Giol, at the story's beginning under circumstances of terrible peril, and the survival and the fate of the child became one of the narrative's key emotional drivers. Like her fellow orc performers, Galvin underwent extensive preparation with movement coach Terry Nortre to develop the physical language of an orc warrior human, and her performance capture work was then translated by the visual effects artists into the finished digital character. Her chemistry with the Toby Cabell's Trouton is one of the film's genuine achievements. The love between these two characters, communicated through a digital medium, carries real emotional force. The opening sequence of the film, in which Draka gives birth while fleeing through a dying world, sets up the emotional stakes of the orc storyline with considerable effectiveness. Galvin's work in these scenes required her to convey extreme physical and emotional vulnerability while wearing a motion capture suit, a task that required both technical skill and raw emotional commitment. Callum Cathrani as Morris. Callum Cathrani, a Canadian actor born in Sunderland, England on September 14, 1960, brought decades of experience to the role of Morose, the caretaker of the magical tower Karazhan, and Mehdev's loyal assistant. Morose is a character with deep roots in the World of Warcraft lore. He was famously the first boss encounter of the Karazhan raid in the MMORPG, making his inclusion in the film a deliberate piece of fan service that players of the game would recognize with delight. Rennie is best known as a North American for his long-running role as a Ray Kowalski in the Canadian American series Due South, as well as for significant appearances in Battlestar Galactica as Libon Coney and the American series Californication. He brings quite slightly unsettling quality to Morios, a man whose complete devotion to his master has made him both formidably capable and, as the film reveals, tragically blind to Mehdev's corruption. Burclay Duffield as Callan Lothar. Burclay Duffield as Canadian actor born in Vancouver on December 30, 1992, took on the emotionally significant role of Callan Lothar, the son of Anduin Lothar. Callan's presence in the film raises the personal stakes for protagonist in a crucial way. Discovering that his son has enlisted in the military without his knowledge, Anduin is forced to confront the extent to which his dedication to his duty as a soldier has cost him his relationship with his own child. The dynamic between father and son is one of the film's most affecting human relationships, even if it receives less screen time than the larger scale conflict would perhaps suggest. Duffield, who built his career primarily through Canadian television production, brings a youthful earnestness to Callan that makes his eventual fate all the more painful. His death in battle at the hands of Black Hand becomes the emotional catalyst for Anduin Slaughter's final confrontation with the Orc warlord, giving the film's climax its personal dimension. Terre Notre, movement coach, and Gromash Hellscream. Terre Notre occupies a unique position in the Warcraft 2016 credits, functioning simultaneously as a performer and as the movement architecture, whose influence permeated virtually every aspect of how the film's arc characters were physically realized. Notre is one of the Hollywood's foremost movement coaches and physical performance specialists, with extensive experience helping actors develop non-human physicality for fantasy and science fiction production. In Warcraft, Notre served as both stunt coordinator and movement coach, working with the film's orc performers Toby Cabell, Robert Kaczynski, Clancy Brown, Daniel Wu, and Anna Galvin to develop a consistent and believable physical language for creatures who are fundamentally different from human beings in their size, weight, distribution, musculature, and biomechanics. This work was essential to making the digital orc character feels like genuinely physical presence rather than animated constructions. Beyond his behind the scene role, Notre also performed the character of Gromash Hellscream, the chieftain of the Warsong clan, through performance capture. Though this credit appears in the IMDb listing simply as Peon, a deliberate misdirection apparently intended to prevent spoilers about the character's appearance. Gromash is one of the most recognizable names in all of Warcraft lore, and his inclusion in the film, even in limited capacity, was significant and for dedicated fans. Notro's broader career includes extensive work on the Planet of the Apes franchise, Rise, Dawn, and War, where he similarly served as both movement coach and performer, and numerous other productions requiring non-human physicality. His contribution to Warcraft was recognized as one of the film's genuine achievements by critics, who noted that the orc characters were among the most convincing digital beings ever put on screen. Michael Admirath-Waite as King Magni Bronzebeard. Michael Admirath, a Canadian actor, took on the role of King Magni Bronzebeard, the legendary dwarf ruler of Ironforge. The inclusion of Magni in the film was another piece of deliberate fan service, giving World of Warcraft players a glimpse of the Dwarven kingdom and its iconic leader. Admethwaite's Magni's appearance in the Council of Six sequences, representing the Dwarven perspective on the Orc threat. The character requires prosthetic makeup and carefully physicality to suggest that dwarf's compact, powerful build, and Admethwaite brought both good humor and genuine dignity to the role. For players of the MMORPG, seeing Magni Bronzebeard on the big screen was one of the film's most gratifying moments, and Adamthwaite's performance honored the character's established personality as a blunt-speaking, fiercely loyal warrior king. Ryan Robbins as Karos. Ryan Robbins as Canadian actor, who has appeared in numerous genre productions including Battlestar, Galactica, and Countinium, plays Karos, a knight in the Stormward army who serves alongside Lothar and his men. This role is relatively limited in scope, but Robbins brings a professional reliability to that anchor several of the film's military sequences. His extensive background in Canadian genre television, he appeared in Battlestar Galactica's revival as Charlie Connor, a memorable recurring character, made him a natural fit for the World of Warcraft's military character, and his physical credibility in armor enhanced the film's deception of the Stormwood fighting force. Glenn Close, the uncredited cameo as Elodie, perhaps the most surprising and celebrated casting decision in the entire film, was the uncredited appearance of Academy Award winning actress Glenn Close as Elodie, described in the production as an ancient maid locked within an artifact housed in Dalaran. The Guardian, before there was a Guardian, Close agreed to appear in the role despite receiving no official credit, a gesture that speaks to both her genuine enthusiasm for the project and her relationship with the filmmakers. Glenn Close is one of course, one of the most celebrated actresses of her generation, a six-time Academy Award nominee whose career has spanned more than 4 decades and encompassed some of the most iconic roles in the film history. From the dangerous Alex Forrest in Fatal Attraction 1987 to the manipulative Marquis de Martuelli in Dangerous License 1988 to the iconic Cruella de Vil in 101 Dalmatians 1996. Her willingness to take an uncredited supporting role in a fantasy blockbuster was unexpected and delighted audiences who spotted her. The character of Elodie exists at the very periphery of the film's narrative. She appears briefly in a sequence set in a Dalaran, providing Khadgar with crucial information about the fell magic that was corrupted Mehdev, but her presence in the film sent a clear message. The production was taken seriously by serious actors, and the world of Warcraft had attracted talent willing to engage with the material on its own terms. In the comics and expanded lore, Elodie is described as the first guardian of Trisfel, making closest appearance in the role a significant connection to the deeper mythology of the Warcraft universe. For the fans of both the franchise and Close's distinguished career, the cameo was one of the film's most memorable moments. Supporting player and ensemble contribution. Beyond the principal cast, Warcraft assembled a substantial ensemble of supporting actors who filled out the world of Azeroth with lived in. Specifically, Eugene Lipinski appeared as Findan, contributing to the make sequence that established the political dimension of the human response to the Orc threat. Anna Van Hoof played a lone man, while Tommy Ryder appeared as a young version of Mehdev, allowing the film to explore the character's backstory with additional visual context. Dylan Scombing took on the role of young Varian Royn, a character who would be similar to Worldcraft player as the son of King Lane, who eventually became one of the game's most important human leaders. His appearance in the film is both a knowing nod to the game's lore and a setup for potential sequence that would have explored his story in greater depth. Callan Mulvey appeared as a warrior in the film's battle sequences. Mulvey is an Australian actor who has appeared in productions including 300, Rise of an Empire and Batman vs Superman, Dawn of Justice, and his physical presence contribute to the film's depiction of Stormwind's fighting force. Similarly, Adrian Glyne McMoran and Kyle Rideout appeared as military officers in several scenes. Dean Redman took on the dual role of Ferris and Caged Wolf, the latter reflecting the film's effort to show our perspective on their own people's plight. Glenn Anna appeared as a compound guard. Elena Vulture was cast as a Drarini mother, providing a glimpse of the Alliance race that appears in the film's opening sequence on the dying world of the Dariner. The casting also included Elizabeth Rosen as Westfall Woman and Mackenzie Gray as Lordarian Delegate, one of the representatives attending the Council of Six who must determine how the Kingdom of Azeroth will respond to the Orc threat. Christine Sloan appeared as an elf delegate, the variable Wiseman as Kultrain delegate, giving brief glimpse of the broader world of Azeroth beyond the central human-orc conflict. Patrick Sabongi and Kent O'Connor appeared as a footman, rank and file soldier of Stormwind whose presence gives the family military sequence and a sense of scale and human cost. Wesley McClancy appeared as a gate guard, contributing to the film's depiction of Stormward fortification. Dan Pine appeared as clansman, while Jill Morrison appeared as an indecisive woman. Christina Jester Zimbaska appeared as Archmage, representing the highest level of mage authority with Dalaran. The character contributes to the film's portrayal of the Kirin Tor, the Mage Council, whose responses to Mahdev corruption provide one of the film's key plot threads. The motion capture ensemble redefining performance. One of the most distinctive aspects of the Warcraft 2016 cast is the extent to which it relies on performance capture technology to bring its or characters to life. Unlike animated films in which voice actors provide performance in a recording booth or visual effect blockbuster in which digital creatures are animated by a team of artists without direct performance input, Warcraft's or characters were built from the ground up on the performance of live actors working in motion capture software. This approach, which has been pioneered by Andy Serkis and his work as Gollum in the Lord of the Rings and Caesar in the Planet of the Apes franchise, and perfected over decades of increasing technical sophistication, gave the orc character a quality of physical and emotional life that purely animated creation often lacks. Every gesture, every glance, every micro expression visible on the finished digital character was rooted in a human actor's performance, captured by an array of cameras and sensors and then translated by the film's visual effect team into the final images. The visual effect work on Warcraft was handled by Industrial Light and Magic, among other companies, and the scale of the effort was reflected in the film's credit. More than 1100 visual effect artists are listed, a number that gives some indication of the extraordinary technical ambition involved. The marriage between two performances captured the digital artistry produced arc or characters that many critics and audiences members consider the film's greatest achievement. More emotionally compelling and visually credible than anything that human cast appeared in, which was simultaneously a tribute to the technology and somewhat backhanded criticism to the human storyline. Terry Notre's role as a movement coach was central to this achievement by developing a consistent physical language for one, all the orc performers, defining how orc walk, run, fight, carry themselves in repose, and express emotion through their bodies. Notre ensured that the various orc characters felt like members of the same species sharing the same physical reality rather than digital construction that happened to share similar design aesthetics. Behind the scene, the casting process. The casting of Warcraft was managed primarily by Mary Verneau and her team, working in close collaboration with the director Duncan Jones and the producer Legendary Pictures, as the process was completed by the scale and nature of the material. Unlike a conventional historical drama or contemporary thriller, Warcraft required actors who could convincingly inhabit the world of Orc Griffin magic portal, and medieval fantasy kingdom, many of whom would spend significant portion of their screen time performing against nothing more than empty air and colored markers. Jones has spoken in interview about his desire to cast actor who could bring emotional authenticity to the material rather than simply impressive physical presence of the franchise recognition. He wanted audience to care about the character, not just admire the spectacle, and this meant finding a performer who could find the human or truth in such extreme fantasy. The announcement of the main cast in December in 2013 came with after an extensive search and that had explored numerous alternatives for key roles. The lead role of Anduin Rother, as noted, had attracted Paul Dano, Anton Mount, and Anton Yelchin, among others. Before Fimmel secured it, the role of Garona had been considered for Idina Menzel, Debbie Gibson, Jules Deplis, Alison Astwood, and Clayton Messeter. These deliberations suggest a casting process that was genuinely open to different interpretations of the character rather than mechanically matching actor to existing fan expectation. The production filmed primarily in Vancouver, Canada, with additional work in the United Kingdom. The Vancouver setting gave the production access to one of the world's most sophisticated film infrastructure networks and a deep pool of local acting talent that contributed significantly to the supporting cast, explaining the preponderance of Canadian actors in secondary and background roles. Reception, box office, and the cast's legacy. Warcraft 2016 opened to mixed reviews from Western critics but performed extraordinarily well at the global box office, grossing approximately $493 million against a production budget of $160 million. The film's unusual reception pattern, relatively weak performance in North America but massive success in China, where it became one of the highest grossing films of 2016, reflected both the extraordinary global reach of the World of Warcraft brand and the uneven quality of the film's critical reception. Critics in the West were divided. Some praised the film's ambition, world building, and the quality of its title or character, and the commitment of the its cast. Others found out the human storyline underwhelming and the pacing uneven, and the narrative overly crowded with characters and the lore difference that would be opaque to non-players of the game. The film earned a Rotten Tomatoes a score of 29% from the critics, but as considerably more favorable audience score, reflecting that the divide professional critical response and fan reception. For the cast, Witchcraft represented different things at different stages of their career. For Travis Fimmel, it was his first major Hollywood lead, arriving at the peak of his Viking fame. For Paula Patton, it was an action role of a kind she had not previously attempted. For Ben Foster, it was in other way in a long line of complex character studio. For Kobe Table, it was a showcase for his emotion capture ability following his work on Ron and a Planet of the Apes for Truth Nega. It was a supporting role in what would prove her to be her breakout year. For Glenn Close, it was an unexpected and generous gesture toward a project she clearly believed in. The absence of a sequel, which was a film's mixed domestic performance and made impossible despite its global profitability, meant that these were characters and the actor who played them they were not able to continue their journey in the way that the film's clearly sequel baiting ending suggested that was intended. Fans who loved the film have a long mourned the absence of a follow-up that might have deepened the story and given the cast a room to grow further into their roles. Conclusion: a cast worthy of Azeroth. Looking at the full cast of Warcraft 2016 in its entirety, what emerges in a picture of a production that took its material seriously and assembled its ensemble with care and ambition. From charismatic Australian leading man who had never played a video game character before to the Academy Award winning who agreed to appear uncredited in the fantasy blockbuster to the performance capture specialist who gave digital or characters more emotional life than their human counterpart. This was a cast of genuine range and conviction. The film's most significant achievement, almost universally acknowledged by even its harshest critics, was the creation of the photorealistic orc character whose emotional reality rivaled that of the conventional live action performance. This achievement belonged as much to the actor wearing motion capture suit, Tobey Cabell, Robert Kaczynski, Clan Brown, Daniel Wu, Anna Galvin, as to the hundreds of visual effect artists who translated their work into the finished screen image. The performer capture ensemble especially proved that the technology had matured to the point where it could sustain genuine dramatic storytelling, not just spectacular visual spectacle. The human cast brought varying degree of the success to their roles. Travis Fimmel was perhaps the most divisive. His mercurial charisma worked brilliantly for many viewers while feeling mismatched to the epic grandeur of the material for others. Ben Foster's Mayday was widely praised as the film's most compelling human character. Dominic Cooper's regal warmth worked following Ben Stiller's earnestness incurred the film's more conventional hero-in-training narrative. The Paul Patton's Garona was given more to do physically and then emotionally, which limited the full realization of what should I have been film's most complex character. What is perhaps most remarkable about the Witchcraft 2016 cast is that it generated around a project of genuine ambition and uncertain. A video game adaptation at the time when such things were still largely considered impossible to execute successfully, and gave it everything they had. The result was imperfect but was cynical, spectacular but never empty. The world of Azeroth brought to screen by the extraordinary assembly of performers and collaborators remain one of the Hollywood's line, a world that you would deserve more stories than it ultimately got. From Travis Fammel's sardonic grief-shadowed Anduin Lothar to Tobey Cabell, his heartbreaking Trotion, from Ben Foster's corrupted guardian to Ruth Nega's defiant queen, from Clancy Brown's terrifying Black Hand to Glenn Close's mysterious ancient maid, the cast of Warcraft represent a remarkable gathering of talent in service of the story that mattered deeply to millions of the people around the world. Whatever its shortcoming as a film, it was never less than a legendary universe, and the people who brought to it green screen deserve recognition for that sincerity. Warcraft 2016, a comprehensive deep dive into the marketing, release, and legacy of gaming phenomena on the red brick screen. Introduction. Few cinematic events in the history of video game adaptation generated as much as anticipation, discussed, and ultimately controversy as the 2016 release of Warcraft. Directed by Duncan Jones and distributed by Universal Pictures, based on one of the most beloved and commercially successful video game franchise in the history of interactive entertainment, the film represented a decade long ago from initial concept of the finished product, a journey that passed through multiple directors, countless script revisions, enormous technical challenges, and deeply personal tragedies for those involved in its creation. The Warcraft franchise, developed by Blizzard Entertainment, first emerged in 1994 with Warcraft Orcs and Humans, a real-time strategy game that introduced millions of the players to the world of Azeroth, its warring races, and the rich mythology that would come to define out one of the game's most enduring universe over the following decades. The franchise expanded through sequels, spin-off trading card games, novels, and most importantly, War to Warcraft, the massive multiplayer online role-playing game MMORPG that at its peak boasted over 12 million active subscribers and fundamentally changed the cultural landscape of online gaming. The Warcraft film, also known in some territories as Warcraft the Beginning, sought to translate the vast mythology into the two-hour theatrical experience, a challenge that even its creator acknowledged was extraordinary ambition. The film starred Travis Fimmel, Paula Patton, Ben Foster, Dominic Cooper, Toby Cabell, Ben Skinner, Robert Kaczynski, and Daniel Wu. Schnetzer, Robert Kaczynski, and Daniel Wu, spanning both human and orc perspective in the story centered on the first contact between two civilizations on the brink of all-out war. What emerged from this process was a film that defined easy categorization in terms of the reception. Despite a significant proportion of the Western critics embraced warmly by fans, or the franchise worldwide. The utterly dominant in the Chinese box office market in the way that no one in Hollywood and fully anticipated. The story of the Warcraft film is ultimately a story about the collision between the creative ambition and commercial reality, between the demand of a passionate fan base and the expectation mainstream cinema. And it is a story that continues to resonate with those who examine the fraught history of a video game movie. The article takes a comprehensive look at very major dimensions of the film's extension, its decade, process, production history, the challenges of filming and post-production, the music that accompanied its theatrical and home media release, and their critical and commercial reception that ultimately determined its fate. Production, development, and pre-production. A decade in the making. The story of the Warcraft film's development is a complex and layered, as the mythology it sought to adopt. The project was officially announced in May 26, where Blizzard Entertainment and Legendary Pictures announced a partnership to bring the Warcraft universe to the big screen. This announcement came at a time when the world of Warcraft was at the height of its cultural dominance, and the enthusiasm for any cinematic extension of the world was immense. From very beginning, however, the film faced significant conceptual hurdle. Blizzard initially envisioned a story set within the universe of original 1994 Warcraft, Orcs and Humans, a tale of first contact and escalating conflict between the human kingdom of Stormwind and the invading Orc horde from the world of Draenor. This setting, while deeply meaningful to the original game's fanbase, was ultimately deemed too similar in tone and aesthetic to Peter Jackson's massively successful The Lord of the Rings film trilogy. The medieval fantasy setting, the ring armies, the ancient evil pulling string behind the scene. All of these elements risk making the Warcraft film look derivative of the New Zealand filmmaker landmark trilogy, and so original conceptual direction was quietly abandoned. This year was between 26 and 2013. You were marked by stagnation, shifting creative direction, and the revolving door of potential talent. By the time of the San Diego Comic Con in 2011, the film was still only in development phase. There was no concrete production timeline in the sight, and this extended limbo period was not helped by the film's industry generally poor track record with video games adaptation during this era. Films based on games had rarely found either critical acclaim or consistent commercial success, and studio executives were understandably cautious about committing fully to an enormously expensive production built around a genuine intellectual property. However beloved, one notable episode from this development period involved the director Uwe Boll, a German filmmaker who had become notorious for this series of critically panned video games adaptations in the early 2000s. Boll made a bid to direct the Warcraft film and was firmly rejected by Blizzard Entertainment. Boll later recounted Blizzard's response with a remarkable directness. The company made it clear that they would not sell the movie right to him specifically, citing concern at the poorly received film could damage the franchise's enormous ongoing commercial value. The anecdote, while somewhat darkly comedic in the retrospect, underscores such how seriously Blizzard took the prospect of the cinematic adaptation and how protective they were for their intellectual property. Sam Raimi, the celebrated director of the Evil Dead franchise and the original Spider-Man trilogy, was attached to the project for several years as the intended director. Raimi's genre credentials and blockbuster experience made him an attractive choice, and his involvement lent the project a degree of credibility during its prolonged development phase. However, by Comic-Con 2012, it became clear that Raimi would not be directing the film, and the project was once again left without creative anchor. The turning point came in January 2013 when Duncan Jones was announced as the film's new director. Jones had made a name for himself with two acclaimed science and fictional films, Moon 2009 and a low-budget but deeply humanistic
space drama that earned critical adoration, and Source Code 2011, a time loop thriller that demonstrated John's ability to work with the larger budget and more commercially oriented material while maintaining creative intelligence. His appointment represented as genuine vote of the confidence in the film's creative potential, and Jones himself immediately set about reshaping the project. Jones' first significant act as a director was a voice his dissatisfaction with the existing screenplay. He described that the screen had greeted him as a working from scale binary fantasy premise. The human are the unambiguous good guys, orcs as the unambiguous monster. Jones, with Blizzard's full support, the game developer had also been looking for to move away from the simplistic framework. Fundamentally, the restructured of the story to give equal to the weight of the moral complexity and to both sides of the conflict. In his vision, the film would be a genuine 50-50 story, one in which both human and orc character and that were rendered with the symptom of internal conflict and moral dimension. This decision would prove to be one of the most consequential choices made during the entire development, character dynamic, and ultimately its reception among the different audience. The writing process that followed this conceptual overhaul involved Jones collaborating with the screenwriter Charles Leavitt. Together, they crafted a story that would center on the two parallel protagonists, Anduin Lothar and military commander of the Human Kingdom, our up of Stormwind and Druton, and the chieftain of the Orc Forceful clan. Both men are father, both are loyal to their people, and both came to recognize that the true threat facing their world comes not from across the battle line, from the corruption emanating from within the Ark leadership, specifically for the Gul'dan's fell magic wielding warlock, or who has led the Horde through the dimensional portal in the search of new world to conquer and drain off the life. At San Diego Comic Con in July 2013, and the production unveiled a concept that trailer that gave audiences their first tangible glimpse of what the film might look like, a brief but evocative battle sequence between a human warrior and an orc that demonstrated the visual ambition of the production and generated enormous excitement within the game community. The casting process that followed was extensive for the critical human role of Anduin Lothar. The production consisted several prominent actors including Paul Dano, Anson Mount, and Anton Yelchin. The Travis Fimmel, who has rise to wide recognition through his starring role as Ragnar Lothbrok in the History of Channels Viking, ultimately won the role in October 2013. Fimmel's physicality, his comfort with action, and his ability to project both authority and emotional vulnerability made him compelling choice for a character who functioned as the film's emotional anchor on the human side of the conflict. The full main cast announced came in December 2013 and represented as an impressive assembly of talent across multiple genres. Ben Foster, known for the intense, often unpredictable performance in films like 10 to Yuma and Lone Survivor, as cast of Medivh, the Guardian of Azeroth, a chance whose magical powers conceal a terrible corruption. Paula Patton was cast as Garona, the half-orc who occupies a no-man's land between the both sides of the conflict. Dominic Cooper took on the role of the King's Lion, the ruler of Stormwind. Tobey Cabell, who had already established himself as one of his generation's most compelling motion capture performers through his work in Dawn of the Planet of Apes, was cast as Druton, who and the orc chieftain who could prove to be one of the film's most emotionally resonant characters. Robert Kaczynski was cast as Orgrim Hammer, Bruton's loyal friend, are in second in command. Later addition to the cast brought further depth to the ensemble. Dennis Wu as a major star of the Hong Kong cinema, who was at the time beginning to gain recognition and a West production through Clancy Brown, the veteran character actor with a voice and presence uniquely suited to the larger-than-life figure, joined as Blackhand, the fearsome war chief of the Black Rock clan. Butch Schnetzer has cast as Khadgar, the young male whose investigation into the fell magic threatening Arizo drive much of the film's plot. The cast also included a number of notable supporting players. Ruth Negga, who would go to receive an Academy Award nomination for The Loving the same year Warcraft was released, appeared as a Queen Tarja Warren. Glenn Close made an uncredited cameo appearance as Elodie, an ancient mega imprisoned within an artifact described as the Guardian before there was a Guardian. Terry Notary, one of the most accomplished movement artists in the film industry, served simultaneously as stunt coordinator, movement coach, and motion capture performer for the character of the Gromash Hellscream. Chris Madsen, Blizzard's senior vice president of the story and franchise development and the voice of the Thrall across the multiple Witchcraft games, made the uncredited cameo as a street vendor in Stormwind. For the role of Garona, the production considered a number of actresses including Indiana Menzel, Debbie Gibson, Julie Delpy, Alison Eastwood, and Linton Messiter before settling on Paula Patton. Patton's casting was notable in part because the film's approach to Grana's visual design, applying prosthetic tucks and green body paint to live action performer rather than rendering her as a fully digital character, representing as deliberate choice to maintain a human presence in the middle of what was otherwise heavily CGI populated Orkwood. In early 2014, newcomer Berkeley Duffer joined the cast as Karen Anduin Lothar's son, a character whose fate in the film would serve as one of the most emotionally devastating movements. Throughout the production period, director Duncan Jones faced profound personal challenges that lent the entire enterprise an additional layer of the emotional weight. Shortly after Jones took on the screen, his wife was diagnosed with breast cancer later during the final stages of production. His father, the legendary musician David Bowie, died from cancer. Jones later reflected on this painful coincidence to the New York Times, observing that his film had effectively started and ended with cancer. These personal struggles inevitably shaped Jones' emotional investment in the project, even if their specific influence on the film's content is difficult to trace directly. Filming. Principal photography on Warcraft began on January 13, 2014, marking the official start of production that had been in various stages of planning and development for nearly 8 years. Filming lasted for 4 months, concluding on May 23, 2014. The production was headquartered primarily in Vancouver, British Columbia, which has become one of the world's most important production hubs for large scale fantasy and science fiction filmmaking owing to its combination of diverse natural landscape, world class production facilities, and favorable filming conditions. Filming. Principal photography on Warcraft began on January 13, 2014, marking the official start of production that had been in various stages of planning and development for nearly 8 years. Filming lasted for 4 months, concluding on May 23, 2014. The production was headquartered primarily in Vancouver, British Columbia, which has become one of the world's most important production hubs for large-scale fantasy and science fiction filmmaking. Owing to its combination of diverse natural landscape, world-class production facilities, and favorable filming conditions. The technical challenges facing the production were extraordinary. The Warcraft film was designed from the ground up to blend live in action photography with extensive computer generated imagery, particularly for the orc characters who were rendered as fully digital creations despite being performed by live actors using motion capture technology. This hybrid approach, combining the physically, emotionally nuanced performance of real actors with the digital sculpting and animation required to realize 7 foot tall orc warriors in convincing detail, pushed the boundaries of what visual effect technology was capable of at the time. Cinematographer Simon Dugan, whose previous credits include Baz Luhrmann, visually extravagant The Great Gatsby, was brought on to handle the film's photography. Dugan noted that the production involved an unusually long preparation period, approximately 12 weeks of prep work, in addition to 18 weeks of actual shooting.
This extended preparation was necessitated by the enormous complexity of coordinating live action performance with computer generated elements that would be added in post production. The motion capture work required for the orc characters was particularly demanding. The performers playing orc roles, including Tobey Cabell, Robert Kaczynski, Clancy Brown, and Daniel Wu, worked extensively with Terry Notre, whose expertise in movement coaching and motion capture performance made him invaluable asset on the production. Notare worked with each performer to develop a distinct physical vocabulary for their own character, ensuring that the digital avatar that would eventually appear on the screen retained a specific physical and emotional qualities of human performance underneath. Ben Foster's portrayal of increasingly fell corrupted guardian Mehdev required its own specialized preparation. Foster worked with Notre to develop a physical approach to demonstrating Mahdev's magical power and his gradual surrender to the demonic influence of the Fel, creating movement patterns that could be both filmed practically on set and later augmented through visual effects. The production worked extensively with Industrial Light and Magic (ILM), the visual effect powerhouse founded by George Lucas, which took primary responsibility for creating the film's digital orc characters. ILM's work on Warcraft was widely considered groundbreaking. The company developed new techniques for facial capture and digital performance that allowed the emotional subtlety of the actor's performance to survive the translation from motion capture data to fully rendered digital character. The facial capture technology used on the orc characters was described by industry observers as being among the most sophisticated ever deployed in a feature film, achieving a level of expressiveness that previous digital characters had rarely managed. Paula Patton's experience filming Warcraft was distinctive in that she underwent a different kind of transformation than her co-star playing full orc characters. Rather than performing a motion capture suit that would be entirely replaced by digital creation, Patton wore extensive prosthetic makeup, including the green skin tones and short tusks that mark Garon's orc heritage. While still being photographed as a live action performer, this approach allowed her physical presence to be directly captured on camera while still communicating Garona's hybrid nature. The production also created elaborated practical sets that grounded the human side of the story in a tangible physical world. The kingdom of Stormwind, with its towering stone architecture and medieval grandeur, was realized through a combination of large-scale set construction and digital environment extension. The Great Gate of Stormwind, several palace interior, and the streets of the city were built as a physical set that actors could inhabit, giving the human portion of the film a tactile weight that complemented the more digitally constructed orc environments. Duncan Jones approached the film's visual design with a philosophy that embraced the video game source material's aesthetic sensibility rather than attempting to downplay or distance itself from its gaming origin. The world of Azeroth in Warcraft games is one of the vivid color exaggerated scales and fantastical architecture, a deliberately heightened reality then a gritty pseudo-medieval realism. Jones and its production designer Gavin Buckwheat worked to translate this heightened sensibility into cinematic terms without making it look garish or cartoonish. A delicate balance that required constant negotiation between fidelity to the source material and the demands of photorealistic filmmaking. Jones himself was philosophical about the role of CGI in realizing this vision. He observed that the computer generated imagery is fundamentally a tool like any other filmmaking technique, capable of producing extraordinary results when applied with skills and care, and capable of producing poor results when applied carelessly. His aspiration was for the CGI in Warcraft to be so thoroughly integrated into the film's visual fabric that audiences would simply accept the world it presents rather than being constantly reminded that they were watching digital creation. Post production. If the filming phase of Warcraft was demanding, post production was exhausting on a scale that few Hollywood productions were ever matched. Post production on the film lasted an extraordinary 20 months, a timeline that speaks to both the ambition of the project and the sheer volume of visual effect work required to bring it to completion. The post production process was centered at ILM's facilities, where teams of animators, technical directors, compositors, and visual effect artists worked to realize the film's extensive digital content. The orc character, Drotan, Orgrim, Doomhammer, Gul'dan, Blackhand, Draka, and many other orcs who populate the film battle sequence and dramatic scenes all had to be individually crafted from the motion capture data collected during the filming and then integrated seamlessly into the photographic footage of the live action shoot. The challenge of integrating digital and practical elements extended beyond the characters themselves. Environment like the orc world of the Darnior, the magical stronghold of Karazhan, the dimensional portal through which the Horde travel to Azeroth, and various magical effects associated with fell magic and arcane spellcasting all required extensive digital work. The scale of these environments enormous, visually complex, and needing to look believably inhabited, pushing the composing teams to develop new approaches to blend digital backgrounds with practical foreground elements. One of the most technically complex sequences in the film is the opening conjuring of the dimensional portal that allows the Horde to travel from dying world of Darenor to the lush life filled with Azeroth. This sequence, which establishes the fundamental premise of the film's conflict, required the visual representation of an enormous magical construct powered by the stolen life force of sacrificed prisoners, a concept that demanded both technical ingenuity and careful aesthetic approach to ensure that the fantasy spectacle felt emotionally grounded rather than simply visually overwhelming. The fell magic itself, the verdant, corrupting magical force that empowers Gul'dan and threatens to poison Azeroth, required a distinctive visual language that would immediately communicate its nature to audiences unfamiliar with the game, while also satisfying fans who had specific expectations based on how fell magic had appeared in the game's artwork and cinematic over the years. The production settled on a sickly bioluminescent green that carried connotation of poison, decay, and unnatural vitality simultaneously, a choice that proved effective in communicating the magic's dual nature as both powering and corrupting. The motion capture performance of the orc actor went through multiple refinements during post production. Toby Cabell's performance as Drutan was particularly praised during this process for the emotional depth it preserved through the digital translation. Cabell had developed Drutan as a character defined by his love for his family, his loyalty to his clan, and his growing moral anguish over the direction of Horde was taking under Gul'dan's leadership, qualities that the animators worked carefully to preserve and amplify the final digital character. The editing process, overseen by editor Paul Hirsich, faced the challenge of balancing the film's two parallel narrative threads: the human story centered on Lothar and his allies, and the orc story centered on Druton and his family, while also managing the dense world building required to make story comprehensible to audience without prior knowledge of the games. This balancing act proved one of the most difficult aspects of the film's construction, and the final cut of the film, running 123 minutes, represented an enormous compression of material that Jones and his collaborator had developed over years of story development. Reports emerged during the post production and in subsequent years that film had undergone significant changes between Jones' original cut and the theatrical release. Jones was said to have assembled a substantially longer version of the film, one that included considerably more backstory, character development, and world building, and the compassion required to bring these to a reasonable theatrical length necessarily removed the material that its creator felt added important context and depth. This reported discrepancy between Jones' vision and the theatrical release would become a significant talking point in the critical and fan discourse that surrounded the film. Music. The score. Ramin Djawadi. The musical score for Warcraft was composed by Ramin Djawadi, one of the most sought after composers working in Hollywood and television. Djawadi had built an extraordinary career through his scores for major productions, including the first Iron Man film and most notably Game of Thrones, whose main title theme became one of the most recognizable pieces of television music in history. His ability to construct large scale, emotionally resonant orchestral music while also weaving in distinctive thematic identities for characters and fractions made him a natural fit for a project with Warcraft's epic scope. Djawadi was hired by Jones and Legendary Pictures in October 2014. During the lengthy post production phase of the film, his hiring came at a point when the visual effects work was sufficiently advanced that he could begin scoring against actual footage rather than temporary visual references. Working with Djawadi during the post production rather than during filming allowed the composer to respond directly to the specific emotional rhythms of the assembled footage rather than working in an abstract relationship to the story. The score that Djawadi created for Warcraft was designed to serve the film's dual nature, the need to create distinct musical identities for both the human and orc sides of the conflict was while also finding a unifying emotional language that could span the divide between the two. The human side of the score drew on the tradition of orchestral fantasy scoring with sweeping brass theme and martial percussion that evoked both the grandeur of Stormwind Kingdom and desperate courage to its defender. The orc material was given deliberately different sonic character with deeper brass tone, more percussive texture and thematic material that communicated the horde power and pride without reducing them to mere antagonists. The score also had to navigate the complex tonal landscape of the fell magic, the supernatural corruption at the heart of story. Dijawadi developed a distinctive musical texture for fell related scenes that blended choral element with dissonant harmonic, creating a sound that felt genuinely threatening and otherworldly while remaining integrated within the film's broader musical vocabulary. The Warcraft original motion picture soundtrack was released on June 10, 2016, concurrent with the film's United States release date. The album allowed the listener to experience Dijawadi's score as a standalone listening experience and it received generally positive notice from the film's music enthusiasts and fans of the composer's previous work. A vinyl version of the soundtrack was released on September 5, 2016, catering to the growing market for the premium physical music format and providing collectors with a high quality format in which to experience the score outside of the theatrical context. Release. Theatrical release. The theatrical release of Warcraft has its own intricate history, shaped by competitive pressure from within the Hollywood studio system. The film was originally scheduled for release on December 18, 2015, a premium holiday release slot that would have positioned as one of the major event films of the Christmas season. However, this date was ultimately untenable for a significant reason. Disney announced that Star Wars The Force Awakens would be released on exactly the same date. The prospect of direct competition with the first New Star Wars film in a decade, one of the most anticipated theatrical events in the history of the Hollywood, was obviously untenable for Warcraft, whose appeal overlapped significantly with the same audience of the genre enthusiastic adults and families. The Force Awakens was expected to dominate. Universal and Legendary made the strategic decision to push Warcraft's release back to summer 2016, giving the film additional post production time while removing it from direct competition with what would go on to become a massive global phenomenon. The film's world premiere took on May 24, 2016 at the Les Grands Rex in Paris, one of the Europe's most storied and largest cinema venues. The Persian premiere was followed by a United Kingdom release on May 30, 2016, allowing the film to begin building international momentum ahead of its North American debut. The United States release came on June 10, 2016, with an Australian release following on June 16. The staggered international release strategy was deliberate and reflected a broader awareness that Warcraft's reception would likely differ significantly between markets. The film was simultaneously released in China shortly before its North American opening, a decision that would prove enormously consequential for its financial performance as China had become by 2016 one of the most important theatrical markets for Hollywood blockbusters, particularly those with genre and fantasy element. The film's marketing campaign was extensive and targeted carefully at both gaming community and general movie-going audience. Multiple trailers were released month preceding the theatrical debut, each calibrated to reveal additional detail about the story and visual world while maintaining interest in the characters. Promotional tie-ins with Blizzard Entertainment allowed the marketing to reach deep into the World of Warcraft player community, and the film's presence at major gaming and pop culture events ensured broad awareness within that core demographic. Home media. The transition from theatrical exhibition to home entertainment proved swift. Warcraft was released on digital download platform on September 13, 2016, approximately 3 months after its theatrical debut. This relatively quick turn to digital distribution reflected the film's modest theatrical performance in the United States and the studio's interest in recouping costs through the home media revenues. The physical media release followed on September 27, 2016 in the United States and Canada, encompassing the full range of available formats. Standard Blu-ray, Ultra HD Blu-ray, the 4K format that was at the time still in the early stages of consumer adaptation. Blu-ray, 3D and standard DVD, the variety of formats ensured that the film was accessible to consumers across the full spectrum of the home entertainment technology, from those with cutting edge display setup to those with more modest equipment. The home media release was accompanied by an innovative cross promotional strategy developed in partnership with Blizzard Entertainment. Select physical editor of the film included a digital copy of World of Warcraft along with digital bonus codes for other Blizzard games, a bundle designed to simultaneously deepen the engagement of existing fans and potentially introduce the film's newer audience member to the game ecosystem that had given rise to the film. This kind of integrated product bundle reflected the unique nature of the Warcraft adaptation as a film with direct commercial ties to an active, ongoing gaming franchise. The home media release also included bonus content documenting the film's production, including behind the scenes footage of the motion capture process, visual effects, breakdowns, and interviews with cast and crew. This supplementary material provided fans with insights into the extraordinary technical achievements that the production had accomplished and gave context for creative decisions that might not have been fully apparent from watching the film alone. The digital and physical home media releases allowed the film to find a second audience, viewers who had missed the theatrical run or who wished to experience the film's spectacular visual design in the optimized condition of a home theater setup. The 4K Ultra HD release was particularly praised for the quality of its image, which showcased the film's rich color palette and detailed visual effect work with exceptional clarity. Reception. Box office. The commercial performance of Warcraft represents one of the most striking examples of the growing divergence between domestic United States and Canada and international box office markets in Hollywood cinema. The film's financial story is effectively two stories playing out simultaneously, one of disappointment in its home market and one of extraordinary triumph overseas, particularly in China. The production budget for Warcraft was $160 million, a substantial sum that reflected the enormous visual effects requirement of a film built largely around digital character and environment. To this production cost, Universal and Legendary Pictures added approximately 110 million in global marketing and distribution expenses, bringing the total investment in the film to somewhere between $270 million and $280 million. Industry analysts determined that the film would need to earn approximately 450 to 500 million dollars at the worldwide box office to reach break even, accounting for the studio's share of theatrical revenue. In the United States and Canada, Warcraft opened on June 10, 2016, facing competition from The Conjuring 2 and Now You See Me 2, as well as the lingering presence of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Out of the Shadows, which had opened previous week. Pre-release tracking had projected a domestic opening weekend of around $25 million from approximately 3,400 theaters, a figure that would have represented a reasonable if modest debut for a film of this scale. The actual North American results were modestly disappointing. Even against these tempered expectations, the film earned $3.1 million in Thursday night preview screening and $10.7 million on its first full day. The opening weekend produced $24.2 million, placing the film in second position, behind The Conjuring 2, which dominated with $40.4 million. Variety had reported in the days before release that the film was generating only moderate interest among the US moviegoers, and the poor reviews and strong competition were likely to limit its domestic ambition, a prediction that proved accurate. The film's performance in its second domestic weekend was particularly concerning, a drop of approximately 70% to just 7.2 million, one of the steeper second weekend decline of the summer season. This dramatic fall off suggested that the initial audience for the film was composed largely committed fans of the franchise who came out immediately, while general audience were not following in significant number. By the end of its North American theatrical run, Warcraft had earned approximately 47.4 million domestically, a figure that against its production cost alone would have represented a severe commercial failure. The international story, however, was almost unimaginably different. The film performed strongly across much of Europe and Asia, but its performance in China was nothing short of remarkable. China had become a critical market of Hollywood blockbuster in the years preceding the film's release, with Chinese audiences demonstrating particular enthusiasm for large-scale fantasy and action spectacle. World of Warcraft had substantial and devoted players base in China, and the release of live-action film set in Azeroth was treated as a major cultural event by Chinese audiences in a way that had no real parallel in the Western market. On its opening day in China, Warcraft earned a jaw-dropping $46 million, a figure that exceeded its entire domestic opening weekend in a single day. The Chinese performance was so extraordinary that the film became one of the second Hollywood release ever after Terminator Genesis to earn $100 million in China without also crossing the $100 million threshold in the United States. It was the first video game adaptation to cross $400 million in total global ticket sale. The Chinese right to digital distribution were sold by Legendary for a record sum, further boosting the film's revenue picture. When all international recipients were trailed, Warcraft had earned $391.7 million outside North America for a worldwide total of $439.1 million. At the time of its release, this made it the highest grossing film ever based on a video game, a record that it would hold until the Super Mario Bros. Movie surpassed it 2023. Despite this global total, the film did not reach the $450 million to the $500 million threshold required for break even. In July 2016, The Hollywood Reporter reported that the film had lost the studio approximately $15 million, though some executives placed the actual losses in the $30 million to $40 million range, reflecting the uncertainties of Hollywood accounting and the varying ways in which costs and revenues are allocated. The box office performance of Warcraft thus presents an unusual case study in global cinema economics. A film that broke records internationally, demonstrated enormous cultural resonance with Chinese audience in particular, and yet still technically failed to return a profit, a paradox that speaks to the enormous cost of producing and marketing film at its scale, and to the significant share of theatrical revenues that flows to exhibitors rather than studios. Critical response. The critical reception of Warcraft was sharply divided along the line that broadly correlated with critics' familiarities with the affectionate for the source material. Among the mainstream film critics, those evaluating the film primarily as a work of cinema rather than an adaptation of a beloved franchise, the reception was largely negative. Among the fans of the Warcraft game, the response was considerably warmer. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film received an approval of rating of 29% based on 233 reviews, with an average rating of 4.4 out of 10. The critical consensus on the site captured the dominant cultural reviews Squincantly describing the film as offering substantial visual spectacle but wasting both the spectacle and distinctive creative gift of its director on sluggish and derivative adaptation, with little evident cinematic value. On Metacritic, the film received a score of 32 out of 100 based on 40 critical assessments, a rating that placed it in generally unfavorable reviews category by the site's own classification system. In contrast to these aggregated professional critical assessment, audiences who actually attended the film gave it considerably more positive rating. Audiences polled by CinemaScore, which survey opening weekend theatergoers, gave the film an average grade of B plus on an A plus to F scale, a solid rating that suggests that audience who choose to see the film largely enjoyed the experience even if professional critics did not share the enthusiasm. Among the critical reviews that shaped the film's reception in the English language press, several stood out for the clarity and specificity of their objection. Jeff Geoff Berkshire, writing for Variety, focused on what he saw as a film's failure to acknowledge or work with the inherent heightened quality of its source material. In his analysis, the film was relentlessly sincere in its treatment of a world that was in many ways deliberately exaggerated and campy, missing opportunities to embrace or comment on the genre convention it was deploying. Rather than finding a cinematic mode that could honor both the serious mythological dimension of the Warcraft universe and its more playful game derived qualities, the film, in Berkshire's view, treated every element with the same in earnest gravity, a tonal rigidity that prevented it from fully engaging either the fantasy spectacle enthusiast or the more critically sophisticated viewer. A. Dobbert, reviewing the film for the AV Club, articulated the view that watching Warcraft was less an experience of a cinematic transportation than of laboring through an extraordinary dense accumulation of mythology, exposition, and visual effect with underdeveloped character work and mechanical franchise building replacing genuine dramatic engagement. Dobbert drew a pointed comparison between Jones and Peter Jackson, suggesting that the director of the acclaimed Moon and Source Code had been overwhelmed by the demand of managing massive CGI production in ways that recalled that Dovet considered the director of the Hobbit trilogy's loss of creative footing in the sea of digital imagery. Helen O'Hara, writing for British GQ, offered a more nuanced assessment. She characterized the film as a genuinely strong adaptation of the Warcraft games in many respects, but argued that it was fatally undermined by the challenges inherent in translating a world with decades of accumulated mythology into a single 2 hour film. The density of proper nouns, fractions, magical systems, and historical background story that the screenplay was required to introduce and explain in compressed form created a viewing experience in which characters had only one time for the most portentous and sometimes cliched dialogue before the narrative moved on to the next plot obligation. The sheer number of major characters, the review counted at least 12 competing for substantial screen time, prevented any of them from achieving the depth of development that would have made their fates genuinely moving. Positive critical voices, while in the minority, did offer substantive praise for specific element of the production. Shirani Linden of the Hollywood Reporter published one of the film's most favorable mainstream reviews, identifying the performance and the overall narrative as the genuine highlight of the film and finding more to appreciate in its ambition and execution than most of her colleagues. Brian Truitt of USA Today offered particularly warm words for Toby Cabell's performance as Druton, arguing that Cabell managed to bring genuine emotional weight to the character rendered entirely in digital form. A father caught between his love for his family and clan and his impossible situation of having no world to call home and constant danger on all sides. Truitt also made the notable observation that prior knowledge of the Warcraft games was not a prerequisite for enjoying the film, suggesting that the filmmaker had achieved at least partial success in their goal of making the story accessible to newcomers. The fan response to the film diverged markedly from the mainstream critical consensus. Many players of Warcraft game who attended the film responded with genuine enthusiasm, praising the reproduction and fidelity to the visual aesthetic of the game, the care with which familiar character and location had been realized on the screen, and the emotional resonance of the orc storyline, particularly Droton's arc. They felt honored the mythology of the game in meaningful ways. This divergence between the critical and fan reception reflected a fundamental tension in the film's premise. It was made, at least in part, for an audience with a deep pre existing relationship with the material, and those audience brought a context to their viewing experience that mainstream critics could not share. The Chinese critical and audience response was more uniformly positive than the Western critical reaction. Chinese audience embraced the film with a warmth that went beyond mere commercial enthusiasm, with the many viewers expressing deep affection for the characters and the story. The film's moral complexity, its refusal to position either human or orcs as simply good or evil, resonated particularly strongly with Chinese audience as the emotional content of the family relationship, especially Droton and Darka's story and the sacrifice for their infant son.